We must remember that the first people who heard about the new covenant were people who were under the old covenant. And therefore they could appreciate it more. The tragedy with Christians today is they've never been under the old covenant. They straight away hear about the new covenant and they can't appreciate it enough. And so they never really enter into the new covenant. I'll give you an example. In the old covenant, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And they were taught to fear God. And in the new covenant, the main word is the grace of God. So if you hear about the grace of God without having practiced the fear of God, you never come into it. The fear of God made people so scared to do wrong things in the old covenant, a person who really feared God. But all those early disciples were people who had been brought up at home to fear God for 30 years. And then they heard about the grace of God and they appreciated it. Whereas that's the reason why so many Christians today who straight away hear about the grace of God live such backslidden lives, never enter into a life of victory. So when Jesus came, he said that we must go into all the world and make disciples. So when we think of the new covenant, we cannot think of it apart from discipleship. If a person wants to enter into the new covenant, he must first be a disciple. Because that's what Jesus said. We must go into every part of the world and make disciples. And that's another thing Christians have not obeyed. They've told people about how to go to heaven. Most gospel preaching is how to escape hell, how to go to heaven. Anywhere. I mean, you go to the internet or you go any public gospel meeting, it's not about discipleship. It's about how to go to heaven and how to escape hell. And many of us have heard that type of gospel. It's the earliest gospel we heard. And we have not sufficiently heard about discipleship, and then you can never enter into the new covenant. So I want to say something about what Jesus said about discipleship if you want to enter the new covenant. Luke chapter 14. Luke 14, it says, great crowds were going along with Jesus, and he turned and said to them some of the strongest words on how to be a disciple. Now, today, if great crowds come to hear a preacher or a pastor, they say, let's pass the offering bag before this crowd goes away. That's a sad state of Christendom today. That they're more interested in collecting money from these people than leading them to become disciples. There are very few churches that consistently preach discipleship. There are thousands of churches that just collect money. So what are the conditions of discipleship he gave here? 3 times he said here in verse 26 to 33, he cannot be my disciple, he cannot be my disciple, he cannot be my disciple. So we want to look at those 3. First of all, in verse 26, the 3 conditions of discipleship. He said, if you come to me, verse Luke 14:26, and you do not hate your father, and you not hate your mother, you don't hate your wife, you don't hate your children, you don't hate your brothers and sisters, you just cannot be my disciple. Now, all of you brothers and sisters, you've been Christians for a long time. Can you tell me the last time you heard anybody preach that to you on that verse? Even though that is the number 1 condition of discipleship, and Jesus said, go into all the world and make disciples. So what were the preachers you heard in past years telling you? And they never taught you this verse? They never labored to emphasize this verse? Well, I want to do it today.